Greetings, hi, it's me, Dr. Paul Gerhardt, and we're talking about adaptive change. And as a business student, I've had the opportunity to take a look at a lot of different models. And I reflect back to the years when I was growing up or as a young adult, where I've seen a lot of companies change and I've seen a lot of companies come and go. You know, we don't see companies like Woolworths anymore, and Montgomery Ward's used to be a giant organization. I'm not even sure if they're still on the map. And there was a company called IBM, which was the technology giant for manufacturing computers and for software. And it's so interesting to look at how when companies continue to do things the way that they've always done, without looking at the future, how that really can have a negative impact on an organization. You know, I like to use the example of there used to be, there still is, a company, but not so thriving company, called Kmart. And they used to be the #1 seller of cheap, crappy goods. And then the internet came out, and a small cheap crappy goods organization, Walmart, started looking at what it does and started doing things better. Walmart was a company that embraced the internet, for instance, and you can't deny their model. Whether or not you like them or not like them, they are the largest corporation in the world. And they've earned their success because they've really learned how to adapt and create positive change. And you know, Walmart is it's hard to compete with Walmart. You know, there's a Costco, I think, is a company that really competes with them. You know, if you look at volume, store to store volume, they're pretty amazing company, Costco, and I love the way that Costco takes care of their employees. And they've got a lot of good systems in place because their leaders have adapted to change over the years, and you know, both these big companies have done amazing things. Kmart is a company that has nearly gone through bankruptcy and gone through some reorganization, and they're no longer the #1 retailer of cheap, crappy goods, but they're still hanging in there, and they're continuing to take a look at what it is that they do. I had mentioned IBM being the #1 retailer of computers and even software, and they didn't change what they did because, you know, I think in their leaders' perspective, who could unseat them? And it was Michael Dell who, from his own dorm room, as the legend goes, started manufacturing computers to meet the specific needs of his customers. And he started to grow, you know, because he streamlined his his inventory, where he had just enough product to meet customers' needs, and where large companies like Hewlett-Packard, who was the #1 computer retailer for a long time, would warehouse their products and supplies. And it's what they did, you know, to keep costs down low. And so it really makes us take a look at things like supply chain. You know, there's a lot of different parts of organizations that must be considered. And so you have to streamline systems and really constantly look for areas of opportunity and be forward thinking, because change is the one thing that is always going to take place. I could think about being involved in a change management or a change intervention. And the top leaders knew in their heart what they wanted the organization to look like. They had very clear vision, and they actually figured out what they wanted that model to look like. And in using organizational theory, you need to involve as many stakeholders at every level in order to know what you don't know. And in the organization that I'm thinking about, the top leaders brought in the people, asked them questions, and, what should the change look like? What could be the drawbacks of making these changes? And quite frankly, they didn't listen to what the stakeholders said. They just kind of went through the motions and involved stakeholders and essentially wasted their time, and they didn't pay attention. And that caused a little bit of a backlash with the organization, and many failures throughout the organization, which could have been avoided if they had taken care of, if they'd really listened and considered using what they had heard. And so I think it really is important for leaders to really be listening. Listening, is the most powerful interpersonal skill that we have, and listening with the perspective of the other person is intelligent and other people see different perspectives that really are valuable. I like to use the analogy of, 4 walls. You need all 4 walls, or at least 3 walls, to hold up a roof. And each wall sees things from a different direction, and each one is equally as important. And I think that's a really powerful analogy to be thinking about. And so if the roof has all 4 walls in place, that's the organization, it's constantly saying, hey, what are you seeing? What's coming? What kind of changes do we need to be made? Hey, how will this affect you, left wall? If we do these things, what could be taking place there? And then really listening to what it is that each of the stakeholders have to say, and then figuring out how to not just put band-aids in place, but to realign systems and enroll people in seeing how important making those changes is, and why, the why. And recognizing the who will be affected by this, because most people don't like change anyway, but what most people really, really don't like is how organizational change affects other people. And so it's the social aspects that really need to be considered. And if you go into Myers-Briggs, we talk a lot about thinkers versus feelers. And we need both. There's no one best type of personality, and we need each of us to give what we have to offer and offer our insights. But that means leaders really need to be doing that number one most important interpersonal skill of really listening, and listening with respect, and really taking time to reflect on how new systems will affect people and get people enrolled in making change. Organizations, if you think about it, are a lot stronger when everybody feels like they're empowered to make a decision, and everybody sees how what they do truly makes a difference in organizations. So I use the analogy of organizations being like a human body. There's lots of different body parts or organs that are in place, and each organ is made out of many different cells of the body, and when one of those cells is weak or sick, the whole body is not as effective. So keeping every cell happy, or every person in an organization happy, really is important to consider, because the longer people work for an organization, the better they get at what they do, and the more they understand the culture and can contribute to a healthy culture. And so great leaders need to know what they know and know what they don't know, and really need to be spending time making sure that supervisors have input, and supervisors recognize how their actions affect other people, and that what they're doing is really aligned with the mission and vision of what the top leaders are expecting. And top leaders really need to be able to listen and hear what's going on, and be able to realign whole systems rather than just put band-aids on things. So learning about adaptive change really is important, and there's so many different things to consider. So I'm really glad that you're here, and I'd love to hear your insights about organizations that you've been with that has created change, and what happened? What were some of the failures that happened, but more importantly, what were some of the lessons learned from going through change? Change is the one thing that's going to happen and needs to happen in every organization. Are you creating a culture where people feel like they're a part of positive change? If people feel like they're empowered to make necessary changes because they're not micromanaged, and bosses are and leaders are really showing that they're listening and considering what's taken place, you're probably working in an organization where change is much easier because it has a healthy, vibrant culture of people who recognize and embrace change and see how change is vitally important. So I am really glad that you're here, and I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks so much. Have a great